Wake up. It's the Sleep Unplugged podcast, episode 147, Idiopathic Hypersomnia. All I want to do is wake up in the morning. Welcome, everyone, to the Sleep Unplugged podcast. My name is Chris Winter. I'm a neurologist, sleep specialist, and your host. If you're new to the Sleep Unplugged podcast family, welcome. If you're a veteran, welcome back. We are glad you are here. If you want to get in touch with the show, you can do it through our social media. That's Dr. Chris Winter Instagram, Dr. Chris Winter Twitter. We have a Bluesky and Threads page. We have a YouTube page where we post all the video content of our shows. We also have a Spotify music playlist where we put music that we refer to in the title of every show, and we will get to that very soon. If you're watching on the YouTube channel, you can see I'm wearing my Oklahoma City Thunder basketball shirt. I have worked with the Oklahoma City Thunder, I believe, ever since they moved to Oklahoma City. It's been a long time. I really cut my teeth in that organization. They are fantastic. They've got the best people ever, and I love them, care about them very much. The Thunder have won their most regular season games this year with 67. Today is the last day of the NBA regular season. They've already clinched best franchise record, and with one more win, they will tie for the fifth most wins in NBA history. We care about your sleep, Oklahoma City, and we don't want the wins to stop. So we are really excited about that team. And they won our, I think they weren't they this year's Sleep Unplug award winner for sport franchise? I believe so. I can't remember. I lose track sometimes, but if they haven't won, they should have won. So real quickly, comments, corrections, criticism, no sponsor this week. I'll mention two. The first was a wonderful letter I got from John, who wrote, "Thanks for another great episode. As you were wrapping up the episode and talked about how, quote, sleep is always working for you, I was nodding my head in agreement as I listened, and I felt compelled to write and just say thank you. Thanks for continuing to highlight this super important biological fact that the key to overcoming insomnia, that it's the key to overcoming insomnia. I dealt with insomnia in 2022, and thanks to your book and podcast and the science you lay out for us, I was able to significantly improve my sleep in just a few months. I can still have trouble at times, but perfect sleep doesn't exist, right? But when I do, I am at ease because of the truth that you have continually hammered home. You stated it many ways throughout your book and podcast, but here's a few, possibly paraphrased, that stuck with me and that I share with anyone who complains about a bad night's sleep. So these are the mantras or the little pearls that have resonated with John. John W., by the way. Sleep is like a runaway train. There's no stopping it. Sleep is on autopilot to some extent. Your job is to just get out of the way. You can't find sleep. It has to find you. I think I stole that from somebody, John. I kind of remember that podcast. Like it was a woman who was in sleep research. I can't remember her name, but I feel like she said that and I stole it. So we got to be careful with that. I'm sure I've stolen all of these. Let's just put that out there. Sleep is not something to be optimized, but something to be protected. Bedtimes, but to be protected. So those were his pearls. I want to contrast, John, thank you so much for taking the time to write that. I really appreciate that. I will contrast John with a listener to the podcast. So we were talking last week about cognitive shuffling, and I don't know how we got on to talking about the weirding module from the David Lynch Dune movie, but I wrote, I made a post on Instagram that said, I showed the scene from the movie I was talking about where the guy goes, Usul no longer needs the weirding module. It's just super nerdy. I'm exposing myself as somebody who was not having a lot of success with the ladies in high school by telling you how much I adore David Lynch's Dune treatment. But anyway, so I wrote on my Instagram, that's Dr. Chris Winter, what is your weirding module when it comes to insomnia? And there was some nice answers. Some people got it. Like, I know who you are. If you wrote an answer, I know about your taste in movies, but one person very genuinely wrote, I do not understand this question. So, and that's okay. And speaking of the weirding module and the David Lynch treatment, we also talked a little bit about Boss Gags last week and how he was credited for forming Toto. And Toto is the group that we're talking about this week. And speaking of the Dune soundtrack from David Lynch, Toto uh, did it with a little bit of help from Brian Eno, particularly with the prophecy theme, which when I think of Dune music, I love the updated Dune movie. I love the updated Hans Zimmer score, but Dune Prophecy is just incredible. So if you've got Spot, actually, I'll put it on our Spotify playlist just because it's Toto, and we've also talked about Brian Eno on the show before too. So really quickly before we get into the podcast, talking really quickly about Toto. I did manipulate the line from Roseanne a little bit to fit our needs in the show. The line in Rosanna is in Roseanne is all I want to do when I wake up in the morning is see your eyes. So I played around with it and made it all I want to do is wake up in the morning because sleep inertia is a big problem for people with idiopathic hypersomnia. We're going to get to that. So Toto is, of course, Jeff Porcaro, who plays the drums. This drum beat on Roseanne, we were talking about a little bit last week. This little shuffle that he sort of took a little bit of John Bonham from Led Zeppelin and another drummer, Bernard Purdy, and kind of put it together and made an amazing song. It is so nuanced. It is so technically perfect. It won the 1983 Grammy for Record of the Year. Toto 4 won the 1983 Grammy for Album of the Year. It was massive. Even the music video for Roseanne has a young Patrick Swayze dancing in it. So you got to pull that up. And I'm not going to get too much into Toto because there's way too much to get into. They are an incredible group. If you got a little bit of time on your hands, you should watch the documentary called Yacht Rock on HBO, where they really talk about that genre of music. I hate the term yacht rock, but Toto was everywhere. If they weren't releasing albums, they were playing on somebody's album. In fact, they did a lot of the musical work for Michael Jackson's Thriller. And one of my favorite songs on Thriller is Human Nature. And Steve Porcaro, Jeff's brother who played keyboards, wrote it. Steve Porcaro and David Paich were the two keyboardists for Toto, and they did the Toto soundtrack we were talking about earlier. The legend is that it was because Steve Porcaro was dating Roseanne Arquette that they did the song. Actually, he was dating Roseanne Arquette. David just liked the name Roseanne, so he used that for I'm sorry, Rosanna. I keep saying Roseanne. Rosanna. He used that name for the title of the song just because he liked it. But really, really incredible musicians. So we'll put Rosanna on the Spotify music playlist. We'll put maybe the prophecy theme on there as well. And hats off to Toto. They should absolutely be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I don't really understand what the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is against these guys. These guys are amazing, amazing musicians, and everybody knows it. But the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame likes to hold stuff like that over people's heads. Anyway, so let's get into idiopathic hypersomnia. This is the natural. I can't. We're what? God, we're 160 episodes in here, and we haven't done this yet. We've done a lot about narcolepsy, and I'm going to put out there my own bias here a little bit. Is that in the sleep world, there are two different kinds of idiopathic hypersomnia diagnoses. There is the legitimate contemplated, evidence-based diagnosis. And in the past, there was the diagnosis of a doctor that just did not want to mess with you. Because up until very recently, idiopathic hypersomnia did not have an FDA-approved treatment. So when a doctor said, I think you have IH, then what they were often saying was, so sorry, nothing I can do for you. And we're going to get into that a little bit. Another reason I decided now was the time. I was recently in Houston and I gave a lecture about a drug that has been FDA approved to treat IH, not only in adults, I'm sorry, in adults, sorry. The drug has an indication to treat narcolepsy in kids under the age of 7. It has a separate indication to treat IH in adults. And we've talked about this drug before. It's oxybate. Xyrem is the high sodium version of it. Xywav, the lower sodium version of it. So Xywav is what I was there speaking about specifically. So this is huge. And a big reason why I wanted to do this podcast was we no longer can say there are no FDA approved treatments for IH because there is one. Jazz Pharmaceuticals, who I will disclose, I do some work for. I was speaking on behalf of them to do this lecture about IH and a bunch of practitioners there. And we were kind of making them familiar about these new indications for the drug and what that looks like in relationship to its already indicated role for type 1 and type 2 narcolepsy. And while I was there, a big part of IH is this thing we talk about, which is sleep inertia, sleep drunkenness, having difficulty waking up. And I think it's one of the hardest things to treat in sleep medicine. How can you treat somebody who can't wake up to be treated, if that makes sense? And this is a big burden when it comes to parents having to wake up kids because this condition often appears in adolescents and teenagers, young adults, excessive sleepiness. Um, so I was giving this lecture and somebody said, "Oh, you're talking about sleep inertia. Oh, there was a guy right before you who was giving a lecture about sleep inertia and how easy it is to treat with something like Wellbutrin." I was like, "What?" So first of all, Wellbutrin is an antidepressant that's kind of stimulating. Listen, everybody knows it. If you're saying, "Hey, Chris, you've got a patient who's excessively sleepy, either because of IH or narcolepsy or whatever, and you're trying to boost them up a little bit, but they're also depressed, what would you choose?" Yeah, Wellbutrin, bupropion. Why not? Perfect. Great. Is it blowing people away? Are people with severe hypersomnia coming to me saying, "Hey, I started some Wellbutrin, case closed, problem solved"? No. In fact, a lot of people are coming to see me because they've fallen asleep at work or fallen asleep in class or can't wake up in the morning. And guess what's on their med list? Wellbutrin, bupropion. It's already there. They've already tried it. This is not anything groundbreaking. So it was like this doctor who's not just some doctor, kind of a big name in sleep, kind of like one of the people you look up to. Maybe you've got his textbook on your shelf. And I was asked, no, whoa, what are you talking about? Oh, yeah, he was talking about that's a great treatment for idiopathic hypersomnia. Tell me you don't treat hypersomnia without telling me you don't treat hypersomnia. I'll give you a good example. Oh, yeah, Wellbutrin. I mean, yeah. And we've talked about this with hypersomnia before. It is underdiagnosed, it's misdiagnosed. People avoid it. So what are the numbers? Idiopathic hypersomnia. Let's start with narcolepsy. We talked about that before. Type 1, type 2 narcolepsy combined 25 to 50 people per 100,000. So we're talking about 0.025% or 0.05%. Okay, 25 to 50 per 100,000. Um, Idiopathic hypersomnia is rarer than that by the numbers. We're talking about 3 to 10 per 100,000, but it's probably likely underdiagnosed for a variety of reasons. Number one, not a lot of people know about it. Number two, there's not a lot of specifics when it comes to making that diagnosis. And what's interesting within sleep is a lot of times, because there was no great treatment for it, a lot of people would make that diagnosis, I think, to kind of wash their hands of the whole situation. So IH is not new. It was first I think the first IH patient was described, I think in the late 1950s by Dr. Biedrich Roth, who was a Czech neurologist who had described a patient with excessive sleepiness, long sleep durations, very important, and the absence of the narcolepsy features we usually think about, namely cataplexy or sleep onset REM periods. So he called it sleep drunkenness, later became hypersomnia with long sleep time. I think there was also a time where the condition was called narcolepsy without REM abnormalities. But eventually, I think it was around 1976, he formalized the definition of what would become IH. And little known fact, if you're aware of sleep medicine, and we've talked about the sleep study we do to diagnose narcolepsy or IH, we often do the MSLT, that multiple sleep latency test. Here, sleep during the night, we'll put you in bed, take some naps during the day, and see what happens. That MSLT was developed in the 80s in large part to try to help to differentiate between IH and narcolepsy, which I think a lot of people don't really understand. So the idea was if you saw REM-related phenomenon, that was narcolepsy. If you didn't, that was IH. And I'm just going to tell you, it's a terrible, terrible differentiator. And so if you're listening to this and you are a patient who has been diagnosed with IH solely because you didn't have two sleep onset REM periods during your sleep study, or you have been diagnosed with based solely on the characteristics of that MSLT, just understand that MSLT is not perfect. It's missing things all the time and can be fooled. The better way to view the MSLT is one piece of information in a series of things we collect to try to help differentiate these conditions. I'm going to go back to really quickly finish my story in Houston. So I was kind of like, well, that's ridiculous. So anyway, this doctor shows up to my lecture. I see him. He's like two tables in front of me talking to some other guy. And then we start the presentation. I spoke for about an hour. This guy talked the entire time I spoke. I couldn't believe it. I think I've said on this before, the great thing about sleep medicine is you just don't meet a lot of jerks. You really don't. In fact, it's the opposite. People that are just heads and shoulders beyond my level in sleep medicine, the kind of people come up to you and you're like, oh my God, I heard your lecture. It was amazing. I learned so much. No, you didn't. You did not. Liar. But you're just saying that to be nice because you're a nice woman or you're a nice guy. I was shocked. Like, generally speaking, if somebody's speaking during a talk, I just kind of walk over to them with the microphone and continue to talk. But by putting your body next to theirs, they kind of shut up. And I was just in such disbelief that this guy was conversing. And then I said, we got to the part of the talk where we were talking about sleep inertia. I was like, and at this point, he like told his friend, 'cause I was sitting there watching, he was like 20 feet away. Like, oh, hold on, I want to hear what this guy has to say. And I talk about, hey, we've got a drug that really, really changes people's lives and helps with sleep inertia. And he kind of listened and then he just went back to talking to another guy. So anyway, I was like, it's time for the idiopathic hypersomnia. If for no other reason, I can vent about this guy. Anyway, so when we think about IH, how do we differentiate that? So you or somebody you love is excessively sleepy. You've gone to a sleep specialist. What are some features that we're actually looking for to try to figure out, do you have narcolepsy? Do you have IH? And we'll just kind of cluster narcolepsy together, even though there is type 1 narcolepsy with cataplexy, type 2 narcolepsy without. And differentiating those two is also how much orexin or hypercretin you have, but we generally don't do spinal taps for that. Um, Although, when we talk about idiopathic hypersomnia, Dave Rye down at Emory does a lot of spinal taps. Like he's really into IH. We give a shout out to Dave Rye. He runs something called the Idiopathic Hypersomnia Association. Definitely something worth checking out. And up until recently, where we didn't have medications to treat IH, I always kind of looked at physicians as being lumpers or splitters. I was a lumper. I don't want to split you out and call you IH. when as soon as I do that, I've got no therapies for you. If I call you type 2 narcolepsy, oh, seven, eight, nine, 10 different therapies that your insurance will cover. So now that we're actually developing and getting drugs for IH approved, I think everybody will start to gravitate more towards the splitters because now we can be more academic about, well, let's look at their sleep time, their sleep inertia, etc., and make that clinical distinction. It'll probably change the incidence of idiopathic hypersomnia, but we'll have a clinical pathway forward because I swore an oath, I'm going to help you. It's not helping you to call you something that am not sure you have or don't have, but I'm calling you this thing. And as soon as I do, there's no therapy for you. So anyway, how do we distinguish? Well, the first one we've mentioned is cataplexy, that REM-related phenomenon. You're listening to the Sleep Unplugged podcast. I say something about the weirding module and how just speaking about the weirding module makes you less attractive to members of the opposite sex, and you find that funny and you laugh, and your knees feel funny, or you drop something out of your hands, or your head bobs. That laughter or sudden emotion causing that REM-related muscle weakness is cataplexy. If you have cataplexy, you have type 1 narcolepsy. Done. Case closed. Although, I'm going to whisper to you over here. Come over here. I think every sleep researcher does have somebody who has cataplexy that doesn't have excessive sleepiness. Theoretically, that shouldn't be the case, but I do have a guy who's got cataplexy but doesn't describe any sleepiness. But anyway, if you're excessively sleepy and you have cataplexy, you have type 1 narcolepsy. That's an easy one. Um, so that does a good job of distinguishing type 1 narcolepsy from type 2 narcolepsy and idiopathic hypersomnia as a group. Going a little further, we'll talk about the MSLT. Again, the MSLT, as you will see as we go through this list, one piece of data that can be fooled. It's going to be wrong about 30% of the time. It's heavily influenced by drugs. So just keeping that in mind. But by and large, when we look at the MSLT, what we would like to see is for the individual with IH, you're going to have fewer than 2 sleep onset REM periods. If you have narcolepsy, you'll have 2 or more, and that's both type 1 and type 2. Now, there's also some language in the updated scoring that if you have a quick onset of REM sleep during your overnight sleep study, that can count too. We're getting into some semantics here. It's basically that sudden onset of REM is a characteristic of narcolepsy, not so much IH. Now, if you're looking at your own MSLT or you're looking at your kid's MSLT, and where it says sleep onset REM periods, it says 0 or 1, and you're asking me, oh, so this means there's no way my child has narcolepsy? Absolutely not. Exclamation point, underline, bold, Helvetica, 300-point font. I don't know what Helvetica is, but it sounded good. Anyway, so just keeping that in mind. But playing by the criteria, that's what we like to see. So MSLT, we've talked about this, the sleep latency, 2 or more sleep onset REM periods. What about the amount of time it takes you to fall asleep? So remember, there's 5 naps typically. We're measuring how long it takes you to fall asleep. We like to see an individual fall asleep on average over those 5 naps, or 4, depending, over the 5 naps, 8 minutes or fewer in both idiopathic hypersomnia and narcolepsy. So again, you're looking at your sleep study, you're looking at your MSLT, and it says on your MSLT, mean sleep onset, 9.1 minutes. Does this mean I don't have narcolepsy? Does this mean I don't have IH? No. This was one test that showed you fell asleep on average in about 9 minutes. Had it been 8, sure, you meet the criteria, but just because it's 9 doesn't mean you don't. It's one piece of information. We got to look at the whole of the individual. Chris, I fall asleep every day in class. Chris, I fall asleep here. Chris, I cannot wake up. Chris, I could. And then you have this one test. I just had a test where there were 5 naps. He fell asleep in 5 minutes the first nap, 4 minutes the next one, 5 minutes the third, didn't fall asleep the fourth, and 8 minutes the fifth, or something like that. Um, And I was like, what happened during the fourth nap? That's weird. You didn't fall asleep. He said, yeah, they were doing construction out in the hallway of your sleep lab. I'm like, okay, good. So again, these things are all open to interpretation, but for the most part, we want to see that sleep onset happen on average fewer than 8 minutes or equal or fewer than 8 minutes. So that's the MSLT. We can put that away. Let's get into the characteristics, the things you're going to be talking to about with your sleep physician. And your sleep specialist should be asking you these things. The next one is an interesting one, nighttime sleep duration. Generally speaking, narcolepsy patients have a very fragmented nocturnal sleep. We've talked about this. It makes diagnosis very difficult. It can be confusing to the non-sleep person. Somebody takes a long time to fall asleep. They wake up a lot. Oh, I know they need a sleeping pill. No, they do not need a sleeping pill. But anyway, so narcolepsy is generally a normal amount of sleep per 24 hours. It's just fragmented and broken up and all over the place, and there's sleep happening during the day, sleep happening during the night. But if you monitor them over 24 hours over and over, diligently added up the amount of sleep they're getting in those 24 hours, it's about a normal amount of sleep. It's just messed up. That is not the case for idiopathic hypersomnia. These individuals are often sleeping more than 9 or 10 hours and sometimes much more. So to me, forget the MSLT. This is now getting into the distinguishing features of IH versus narcolepsy. Chris, my child will come home from school, struggles to do a little homework, eats a little something, goes to bed at 7, wakes up at 7 the next day to go to school. Okay, that's 12 hours, and still is tired. Weekends might sleep even more. Okay, this sounds a lot more like IH than it does narcolepsy. So that nighttime sleep time is really important. And that leads into the sleep inertia and the sleep drunkenness. And we did an episode on sleep inertia. I believe it was, yeah, it was episode 73. I can't wake up. And we talked, we hinted at the IH and narcolepsy kind of thing in that, but we kind of talked about it as its own entity because it deserves to be its own entity. It is a bear to treat. Chris, I can do anything you want me to do, but I live by myself and I'm constantly late for work. I can't get up for work. How can you help me get up for work? Man, unless I'm going to come by your house and wake you up physically before I come to work, there's not a whole lot I can do. That's why the oxybate class, the Xyrem, the Xywav, these medications that were just FDA approved for IH are so helpful. You take them before you go to bed. Talk to 100 people who take oxybate. Don't take my word for it. Talk to 100 people who take oxybate. Ask them the question, what do you think's the biggest thing that's changed since you started taking oxybate? It's the mornings. Oh God, the mornings are transformative. The mother who cried in my office saying the first day they took oxybate, their kid took oxybate, instead of it being a battle royale to wake up a child who doesn't cannot wake up in the morning, and often even when he wakes up, mom wakes him up. I'm up, leave me alone. Rah, rah, rah. Mom goes back downstairs, upset because she's being screamed at. It's just this terrible situation every school day. And then 30 minutes later, hey, where are you? Where are you? Goes back up. He's asleep. And when she wakes him up again, he has no recollection of waking up before, all the mean things he said to her. I mean, it's awful. And it's every day, every day. No wonder so many homeschool and just try to like figure out a way. We'll just take our kid to school late. We don't care. It's not worth it. Plus, parents have to go to school. Parents have to go to work too. A lot of times they don't have time to mess around. In fact, a lot of times they're calling home to make sure their child got up to go to school, got up and made the bus. They can't stick around. I mean, so that sleep inertia, to be told by somebody you look up to, by somebody who's always given keynotes at big sleep conferences, to be told that I've got a couple cases of people who've really responded positively to Wellbutrin. Man, we are back to that thing I was talking to you about. When you look for something, you will find it. And that is very much the case in medicine. Dr. Wooten told me, Chris, stop looking for the positives in your patients. You look for negative and make them convince you of the positive. Hey, how's the Wellbutrin working? Well, I don't know. I think maybe it's doing okay. You know what that's code for in hypersomnia? It doesn't fucking work. That's what that's code for. But they don't want to hurt your feelings because you got a lot of diplomas on the wall. They feel like you're their last hope. Can't upset this guy because if I upset this famous guy, who's going to take care of me? So of course nobody's going to say, "Oh, it fucking sucks." My patients do all the time. Chris, this is not working. Chris, we are moving in the opposite direction because I give them the space to say that. I'll say to them, "Doesn't really sound to me like this is working that well to you." I've said to my patients on many occasions, "Tell me the truth. Are you better now, having seen me for the last 3 years, or were you better the first day when you came in to see me, having never seen me before?" If if you could switch places with that person and go back, do you think you're losing anything? You've got to give patients the ability to say, this is not working at all. Because if you don't, it's always kind of working with hypersomnia patients. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of, I don't know. I think maybe it might be working somewhat a little bit, maybe some days, other days, I don't, yeah, sure. Okay, great. See you in 6 months. Bye. Here, let me get your name because I'm going to give a presentation about how to treat hypersomnia. And I'm putting you in the success column. God damn it. Unbelievable. So that sleep inertia is a problem. It's a big problem. Big problem. And your Wellbutrin is not fixing it. And I know this because I give Wellbutrin. People are on Wellbutrin. It's not like some this is not ivermectin. We're talking about it's kind of we're parallel here a little bit. Like, oh, ivermectin will solve everything. Come on. Jesus. All right, so CSF hypocretin levels, let's move on. Sleep inertia, big problem, prominent in IH. It can occur in narcolepsy, not as much. If sleep inertia is the major feature and they sleep a ton, you're probably talking about IH. CSF hypocretin is going to be normal in IH, by definition deficient in type 1 narcolepsy, and generally normal in type 2 narcolepsy. In fact, that's a board exam question for all you sleep fellows listening. You've got a patient who's never had cataplexy. CSF hypocretin level is low. What is the diagnosis? It's type 1 narcolepsy, even though they've never had cataplexy. Response to stimulants, better in narcolepsy, often dramatically effective, less so in IH. But got to put an asterisk by that because number one, a lot of sleep doctors are not treating IH. They're not treating it aggressively, and we don't have access to IH patients getting the full complement of hypersomnia medications because of the fact that they're not FDA approved for IH. So while I believe that these drugs are probably less effective for IH patients, it might even be sort of a diagnostic differentiator if you talk to somebody like Dave Rye. I think we have to be very careful because I'm calling this person that I think could be type 2 narcolepsy, could be IH. I'm going to call them type 2 narcolepsy. And then when I treat with the medications for narcolepsy and there's success, was I really successful treating narcolepsy or was I successful treating IH but giving it a different name? You have to be very careful with that. Hallucinations, sleep paralysis are very rare. All those sort of secondary characteristics of narcolepsy, rare in IH, very common type 1 narcolepsy, can be seen in type 2 narcolepsy. And then the cause for these medication for these disorders, IH is thought to be autoimmune. Type 1 narcolepsy could be autoimmune, could be hereditary. It boils down to hypocretin or orexin loss. Type 2 narcolepsy unknown. Are there people out there who believe that all three of these things are sort of a spectrum disorder? Yes. In fact, somebody Houston came up to me and that's was his belief. He's like, why do we split all these people up It's just all part of a big spectrum. Ah, we have a lumper here. Great. Yeah, sure, why not? These are very difficult things to kind of figure out. What are our treatments for these conditions? Let's start with narcolepsy. We've done it before. Adderall, Ritalin, Viccio, the traditional stimulant kind of things. You can Vyvanse, Strattera, those types of things are not truly FDA approved for the treatment of narcolepsy, but you can sometimes get them. Provigil, Nuvigil, armodafinil, modafinil, or Provigil, Nuvigil, modafinil, armodafinil are still mainstays of therapy, work through dopamine, help people feel more awake. Sunosi is a dopamine and norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor. And then we've got Wakix, which works through histamine. And we've got the oxybates, Xyrem, twice nightly high sodium, Xywav, twice nightly lower sodium, and Lumryz, once nightly high sodium. If you want to go through the medications in more detail for narcolepsy, I believe that was episode 39. Boom. Those are our treatments for adults who have type 1 and type 2 narcolepsy. What are our treatments for IH? We have Xywav, low sodium, twice nightly, oxybate for adults. That's it. So if you're using something else, and there's some, it's kind of a stranger uh, treatments for IH that are all completely off-label, experimental, some, clindamycin, antibiotic kinds of things, and some drugs you would give if somebody were having an overdose. And there's a really interesting book I was part of. I think it was called The Man Who Couldn't Wake Up or The Woman Who Couldn't Wake Up. Gosh, I feel bad I didn't. Right, I'll post a picture of it on there. It's a whole case study about idiopathic hypersomnia. Talks all about Dave Ride out at Emory. Really interesting read. So that's it. A little overview of IH. If you've listened to the podcast, we've done several episodes related to narcolepsy. Now you can kind of see how IH fits into that landscape of hypersomnia. The bigger picture is this. If you're struggling with hypersomnia and you're going to see a sleep specialist, and there doesn't seem to be a part of this person's practice devoted to hypersomnia, meaning they're just talking about CPAPs, be careful because you really want somebody who knows the landscape of hypersomnia as you start to march down this. So if you're like, I didn't know 75% of the stuff that you're talking about, Chris, and I've been diagnosed with IH, or I've been diagnosed with narcolepsy, never even heard of half those drugs you're talking about. Find a provider of narcolepsy, hypersomnia, IH care near you who does. Walk into your, and just out of curiosity, and write me, Dr. Chris Winter. If you're like, Chris, I've been treated for narcolepsy forever, and all this stuff is new, never heard of these medications before. What are you talking about? Just write down oxybate or write down Sunosi, write down Wakix, whatever, the one that you haven't heard of before. I want you to go to your provider and say, I just listened to a podcast about hypersomnia and these drugs were mentioned. You've never mentioned these drugs before. Why? And I want you to send me the answer because I'm dying to know why. Because so many clinicians that treat sleep and treat hypersomnia, at least it says so in their website, don't even mention these drugs to their patients because they're hard to get or because they're scared of them or because they don't know anything about them. I don't know. So you let me know the answer to that question. Dr. Chris Winter, Instagram, Dr. Chris Winter, Twitter, Dr. Chris Winter, whatever. Find us on YouTube. Listen to some Toto this weekend when you're getting ready to pay your taxes. Go Oklahoma City Thunder. We're so excited for you. Like and subscribe to the podcast. I love reviews of the podcast if you can do that. And until next week, sleep well.